Welcome to the Book Faire Podcast. My name is Anthony, and this week we have an interview with Christy Mandin. We also have a look at notable new releases and the latest book banning news, including further repercussions of the recent book banning bills out of Texas, and a story of groups coming out to speak in support of the freedom to read. Let's start off with an interview with author and illustrator Christy Mandin and her newest book, Millie Fleur Saves the Night. Welcome back to the podcast. It's been about a year. Can you introduce yourself for any new listeners and the book that we'll be discussing today?
Yep. So my name is Christy Mandin. I'm an author and illustrator of picture books. And last time you had me on, we were talking about book 1 in the Millie Fleur universe, which was Millie Fleur's Poison Garden. And this summer, the second book in that series came out, Millie Fleur Saves the Night. And it is once again in book 1, if the residents of Garden Glen were afraid of anything that was different, calling it poison, then in book 2, they are most certainly afraid of the dark, calling it dangerous. And so Millie Fleur is once again having to convince the residents of Garden Glen that just because they don't fully understand something doesn't mean that it is bad. And she's welcoming the dark back into her town.
And in the first book, Millie Fleur had a poison garden. This time she has a moon garden. Can you talk a little bit about her moon garden and what the inspirations were for that?
Yeah. So since this book starts off the very first page, it starts at sunset and we are put like right into the action in the nighttime. And so the whole book occurs at night. A lot of people don't know that moon gardens are a really important part of an ecosystem, that there are a lot of night creatures that rely on night blooming plants. And so I thought this was a perfect opportunity to introduce some in Millie Fleur's world, all the plants that I put in the books, they're fantastical, but they're rooted in fact. So moonflowers are real. Now, twilight tulips might not be, and snoozing sugar plums, but there are real night blooming plants that are very important. They smell amazing and they serve a night population of creatures. So I figured that would be right up Millie Fleur's alley because she's a spooky, sweet girl anyway. So of course she would have a nighttime garden.
And when you were creating this book, did you do any research on any particular night blooming flowers? Are there any that you can talk about that you maybe specifically drew inspiration from?
So in this book, I think there are more like snoozing sugar plums. That one was like a stretch. That one's not rooted in any kind of real plant flora world. I made sure to put plants. Millie's plants are very fragrant, which is like a key feature of a moon garden because you can't see it so well in the dark. The draw to a moon garden is its scent. So in the book, I made sure that her neighbors are drawn to her garden by the scent wafting through the glen. But no, I didn't do a ton of research this time on moon gardens because I already grow moon plants in my backyard. So we grow moonflowers, we grow night blooming tobacco, which is fascinating because during the day it looks very boring. And then as the sun sets, the blooms open. And I think that's just so cool, like how the plant is triggered in kind of like a sunflower, but in the opposite way, where a sunflower follows the sun. These moonflowers really do wait for the sun to go down before they open up their giant blooms. And so I didn't do a ton of research only because I'm kind of already rooted in that world, pun intended.
And when you're writing a children's book, was it a challenge to kind of get across the idea of the scent of the moon garden when you don't have access to that sense for the readers?
Yeah, so, in a picture book, you're telling 3 versions of a story. You're telling it in 3 ways, basically. So you've got the words and you've got the pictures. And then the third secret way you're telling a story in a picture book is with the page turns. And the layout, basically. And so I made sure that on the page where it says the sweet smell of her snoozing sugar plums drifted across the glen to her neighbors, the illustrations literally drift. So the plants and the sketches go across the spread, and you can see it kind of drawing the kids to her. I I sort of drew on, I don't know if you remember growing up, but like Bugs Bunny, when he would be sleeping in his bed and he would smell something good and he would just kind of lift up and he would kind of follow and you would see like the smoke or the fog of whatever he smelled. That was kind of the mindset that I tried to stay in when I was illustrating the scent.
Right. So characters leading with their nose in an exaggerated way.
Yeah,
And
kind
talking about using the page turns and layouts kind of segues into another wonderful topic I wanted to bring up is breaking the conventions of the medium of picture books. Millie Fleur Saves the Night is primarily taking place at night, and so almost every page is using an entirely black or dark blue background. Can you share a little bit about the artistic side of illustrating with pretty much the polar opposite of what paper typically is?
Right. Yeah, because also not only is it completely set at night, but book 1, if you look back at Poison Garden, one of my stylistic choices, I prefer a lot of negative space. So in Poison Garden, you don't have a sky. Like I don't add that in as part of the background. You have landscape features, in Poison Garden. You've got flowers and you've got houses and grass, but I didn't draw the sky because I really like having that negative space to leave the book kind of open and airy. But then when you're talking about illustrating a book completely set at night, well, now you have to convey that with a color, where before I had this negative space with basically white paper color, paper tone. Now I had to do it with a dark color. And so it immediately felt more closed in, and I immediately panicked because it went against my visual preference of that negative space, and I had to really step back and say, no, it's still, I'm still creating negative space, it's just at night. It was extremely challenging because um, especially because the paper choice that we went with in book 1, it's a matte coated stock of paper, and that just really soaks up inks. So when I was creating digitally, what looked like the color of blue that I wanted it to be, when it printed, came out black. And so there was a lot of back and forth with proofing and color tweaking to make sure that we didn't lose details in the dark, which is tricky. It's hard to draw the dark.
And on the side of uh, testing, printing, going back and revising, this is entirely me speaking ignorantly. Is the paper that it's printed on a different color, or are you printing that color onto it?
Okay, so the if you get, it depends. So if you get like a glossy stock, which most of your picture books that you open up are going to have a glossy type, like a sheen to them. Those are just going to be white usually. It's just a white paper. But in Millie Fleur, the series, the paper is coated. It's a matte stock, and so it has a little bit of texture to it. So if you were to put it beside a bright white glossy, they would look a little different in color. But to answer your question, like for Saves the Night, we were printing that color on the paper. So where you see the dark sky, that is a printed color.
And were there any editorial notes about that? Was there any logistical issues of saying this is going to be entirely printed on solid color? Did they want to tone it down at all? Was there any pushback?
Um, you know what? These first 2 books have been like smooth sailing. I mean, just, which is not, that's not normal. And I want everybody to really hear what I'm saying. Like, it just, all the stars aligned. So there wasn't a lot of pushback on either book 1 or book 2. A lot of things just really worked out. Now, book 4 that comes out. So book 3 comes out next summer. Book 4 comes out next fall. So we have 2 Millie Fleur books publishing next year. Book 4 has been like pulling teeth. And so sometimes it's like that. Sometimes your editorial notes are just going to be a lot heavier. It doesn't mean that the book is bad or, that something's not right. It's just that some books sort of refuse to be born. Like they just really give you a hard time. So no, there wasn't a lot of pushback on book 1 or 2 in a lot of the creative areas.
I've talked to plenty of authors by now, and a couple of people that have written for TV, and they've talked a lot about how when you're writing in TV spaces, you'll have producers and editors and staff writers who are not really experienced in the actual creative side of things, but when it comes to the publishing industry, it seems that everybody has the same story of these are people who are seasoned professionals that know the market and know the audience very well. Was that your takeaway as well? When you got those notes, were you able to trust what they were bringing you?
So I think just in general, my experience has been creatives, we are a self-conscious lot. Like we're a sensitive group, right? And so, and that's how we end up making these things. We put our heart on a page, like we feel our feels real big and then they turn into these things we've created, right? And so anytime notes come back, I have learned to kind of just, I'll read it and then I don't respond for a couple days because every single time my initial reaction is going to be, this was perfect. What do you even mean? Like it's just a knee-jerk reaction. But if I sit with it for a couple of days, I remember just what you said. These people are professionals. I am the creator and they are the first readers. And you have to trust your readers. Like you have to trust that they see something that you're too close to in the production process. Like when you've been sitting and staring at a thing for months, you're too close to it to be objective. So it doesn't mean that you have to accept all of their notes. That's where the infamous STET comes in. You can respond with the acronym STET, and it's just basically for Latin for let it stand, leave it be, don't change it. So you have that option as a creator. It's just that once that leaves your hands, it's a collaborative effort. And you want it to be because you want it to be the best it can be. But I will say that there are departments within publishing that really grind my gears. And I try to remember, like, these are nice people, but there are certain departments that are trickier for the creative to work with because they are a more literal department. So like, for instance, on my first book, Lucky, the Pearl is reading she finds an old magazine under the ocean amongst the trash or whatever, and she's reading it. And on the spine, I had put 1983 as the date. And you can see her holding it, and you can see the front and back covers, and I'd put a barcode on it. And copy editing, my very favorite department, came back and said, actually, in 1983, they didn't put barcodes on magazines. So some departments are trickier to work with because it's like, okay, I will take the barcode off, but who is in the 4 to 8 group gonna notice this, but still important. So yeah.
And taking things a little bit back to Millie Fleur Saves the Night, the next thing that I wanted to go on to before we got onto that wonderful little tangent there, and I love those tangents, was the choice to personify dark. Can you talk a little bit about that creative process and why you went specifically with feminine pronouns for her?
You caught that, huh? Yeah.
I did catch that.
Yes. So the dark is a her. She uses she, her pronouns, and she is personified. And so I wanted the dark to be this non-threatening creature, right? Because as a classic childhood fear, the dark is this abstract, very big thing, right? It's not something we can hold. We can't put it in a box and put it away, right? We can't touch it. And so as a kid, when you can't know it in that tangible way, you start to fill in the gaps in your imagination, right? We just do that as humans. When we can't know something like physically, we want to fill in those gaps. And so I thought maybe I can just go ahead and fill in that gap for kids with something that's not scary. And so she does have she, her pronouns because I thought I want her to have um, this grandmotherly, this like matriarchal, old soul, gentle vibe. And so the dark is a her. Um, and then also the character design was really important because I wanted her to have like a soft, squishy, you could just see yourself just like leaning into her kind of vibe. So she's real non-threatening.
And you mentioned filling in the gaps of the unknown with your imagination. And that really wonderfully ties back to something we talked about earlier, which was the use of negative space. And the dark just kind of is a negative space. Can you talk about that a little bit? Kind of bridge those two concepts together for the readers and listeners.
So yeah, like on the cover, you'll notice that she is the negative space for Millie Fleur. So she looms behind her, and then the moon looms behind the dark. Yeah, so I didn't want to give her a lot of details because I didn't feel like, like when you look out into the dark, you start to lose details. And that is the whole thing that makes the dark terrifying because during the day, every every silhouette is illuminated, right? And you've got every line. You can see every detail of a tree or a branch, every detail of what's beyond the woods. But once that sun starts to set, you start losing those details. And again, you start to fill in the gaps of what might be in there. Even though you've seen it in the daytime, you've seen it's just trees. It's just trees in those woods. In the nighttime, it's this expanse of dark, right? And so I didn't want her to have a lot of details except for right around the edges. She does have her branch antlers, and she does have those glowing eyes, and that was intentional as well because how many times have you kind of peered into the darkness and convinced yourself that something's looking back? And so I thought if kids could just think, well, what's looking back? It's just her. And then now that's not as threatening. So yeah, she is the dark.
And that's something fascinating that human minds do just completely naturally is we are we are just almost evolutionarily built to see patterns and notice patterns. And one of the patterns that our brains are trained to pick up on are human bodies and faces. And so that kind of leans into the design of the dark being a kind of vague, but almost like a bipedal standing figure. Like it's somebody, it could be a person.
Could be, yeah. Yeah. She's kind of polar bearish, but yeah, I think she kind of embodies all those things we imagine might be out there, like Bigfoot or, um, Mothman. She's cryptid in that way. But again, she's not, she's not scary. And in fact, she is scared of all of them, which I think is that's a great conversation starter, is that the thing that you have decided that you're scared of, you might actually be the scary thing to them, which is a great conversation to have with kids.
And what is it that leads Millie to seek to save the night? Because the book is called Millie Fleur Saves the Night, and that title alone kind of gives the idea of there is a threat, not to a person, but to a neighborhood or a community. However, in this case, the knight is an actual character in the book. Can you talk a little bit about what brings Millie to seek out and to save the night.
Yeah. So in the beginning of the book, it talks about how Garden Glen was afraid of the dark, and they lit up, like as soon as the sun set, they lit up every house and yard. All the spotlights shone on their prize winning gardens, and it was as bright as the midday sun. And Millie Fleur, like, she thinks she doesn't like that. She enjoys the dark. And in fact, her night garden has struggled to grow since she has moved to Garden Glen, and she's not seen any of her nighttime friends. So we right out of the gate established that Millie Fleur is comfortable with the dark. Not only is she comfortable with the dark, she's friends with the dark and all of the creatures that are associated with it. And so, because Garden Glen has essentially banned the dark, it doesn't say that explicitly, but they have a lantern committee, and we know committees often love to ban things, and so they have essentially banned the dark, and they've told her, this is dangerous, you don't know what is going to happen. And she explains to him, it's not, you just need to get to know her. She's not dangerous, you just need to get to know her. And so she goes out to the deep, dark woods, and she welcomes the dark back. And then her friends realize, she shows them that there are things that the dark can offer you that the light can't. For instance, you can't see shooting stars if you keep all these lights on. And when you turn the lights on, the dark is gonna flee. Like, you can't have both. And there's a time for daytime and there's a time for nighttime, and you're missing out on a whole other world by eliminating the dark from your town. Which has, there are a lot of kind of hidden meanings in that in itself. There's an ecological slant on that. There's a social aspect to that. So there's a lot of conversations that can be had here beyond just the classic afraid of the dark theme.
And so, Christy, you mentioned that there's an ecological slant to the story. Can you talk a little bit about the phrase light pollution that you mentioned in the author's note,
Yeah.
and what that means?
Yeah. So, there have been a lot of studies done about lighting up the night and whether that actually makes us safer or not. And they found that it actually doesn't, make you safer to turn all the lights on in a city. It actually creates more shadows and things like that. So in the author's note, I've tried to encourage kids to be brave enough to turn out their lights, because these too many artificial lights impacts the ecology of where they're living. So fireflies, they can't find each other if the lights are on. And if they can't find each other, they can't mate. And so we don't get baby fireflies. We don't, the cycle is interrupted. We also can't see the stars, so there are dedicated dark sky parks now. So yeah, the ecological side of things, sea turtles, if you live near the ocean, they get confused with all the lights. So for kids that are like real big animal lover types, I think it'll resonate with them that when they turn off their light, they're not just being brave, they're helping a whole other creature.
So it's not just like the fear of the dark. It's more so the illusion of safety that Garden Glen wants.
That's
And
right.
by having the lantern committee and the mandate for the lamps, they're kind of harming their own community and they don't even know it.
They don't even know it. Yeah, and so that's why Millie Fleur, like, her through line is be curious enough to understand and seek out more information about the thing that you're afraid of, because you don't know what kind of harm you're doing when you are just afraid without information.
And Christy, the last time that you were on, the final question that I ask to all authors is, how do you see yourself and the work that you do as either an author or an illustrator? And the answer that you gave was, in summary here, that you feel that authors and illustrators of children's books are trying to connect with their childhood self. And so you're writing for your kid self, and you see Millie Fleur as a disruptor, and that's how you want your books to be perceived. Is there anything that you'd like to add to that now that you've had a full year of experience?
Yeah, I do see her as a disruptor, and I think that I'm from the South, And John Lewis is from my home state of Georgia, and his phrase was "get into good trouble." And I think that is what a picture book can do for kids and grown-up readers as well, is it can help you get into good trouble. It can help you know where you do need to do a little bit of disrupting, either whether it's in your mind, in your thoughts about the world around you, or out in your community in a good way. So yeah, I still write for those, for my kid self, and I write for the future disruptors, I hope.
And on that theme of make good trouble, you also mentioned giving young readers agency, letting them know that they can make change. So with all of that, writing for your younger self, connecting with your younger self, agency, make good trouble. In the last year, do you feel that the work that you've been working on has been true to that statement?
Yeah, I think so. Poison Garden has been received in a way that I could never have imagined. But it has I've had so many people tell me, grown-ups and kids alike, like this made them feel seen. And so yeah, I think that the work that I've put out, I'm really proud of in the last few years that I could write a million more Millie Fleur stories because I'm so proud of what this character has done for people. So yeah.
Thank you. That was an interview with Christy Mandin. Her book, Millie Fleur Saves the Night, as well as Millie Fleur and the Poison Garden, are on sale now. You can learn more about Christy and her other work at christymandin.com. Next, we'll be looking at some new releases, but first, if you appreciate the work being done on the Book Faire podcast, there are a number of ways to show your support. First, you can like, comment, favorite, or subscribe wherever you are currently listening to help push the show out to new listeners. Second, you can follow the podcast on Blue Sky or TikTok at Book Faire Pod, or go to patreon.com/thebookfair. The Patreon is where you can find episodes posted early, along with links to news sources used throughout the show. Lastly, the best way to help the Book Faire podcast grow is simply to share it with a friend, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Now, on with the show. Let's take a look at some notable new releases out this week, starting with Confessions from the Group Chat by Jody Meadows. This book focuses on 8th grader Virginia Vaughn. When her best friends start teasing her about her crush, Grayson, Virginia defends herself vehemently. This leads to a massive friendship-ending blowout between Virginia and her 3 besties. But the next day, things get much, much worse. Screenshots of the mean things Virginia has said about her classmates in her friend's private group chat get posted online. Suddenly, the entire school turns against her, and Virginia finds herself completely isolated. In her isolation, the 13-year-old attempts to befriend Grayson, who is kind of a social pariah himself. She also finds refuge in a texting friendship with someone known only as Knight Errant, who she connected with via a wrong number message. As the bullying from her former friends intensifies, Virginia is caught right in the middle, struggling to navigate the aftermath of her public fall from grace, while juggling these 2 developing friendships. Author Jody Meadows explores so much in this book, from budding first love to the serious complexities of toxic middle school frenemies. She also dives into the potential dangers and benefits of online friendships and communities. It is an introspective offering told with a winningly sharp, tech-savvy narration. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Our next release is The Bionic Boy by Lynn Plord, an uplifting, feel-good narrative that follows the journey of 5th grader Benji Ames Kyer. Benji absolutely hates being the center of attention, especially the stares and comments he gets because he was born without hands. He lives in Maine with his 2 dads, who adopted him from an overseas orphanage, and he's completely accustomed to using tools and straps for utensils. Benji tries to emulate the can-do attitude of his favorite superheroes, but he often feels like the exact opposite of super, especially when it comes to his spirited 7-year-old sister Becca, who has Down syndrome. Benji is heartbroken that he can't hold his sister's hand to comfort her when she's overwhelmed, or to keep her close, since she's inclined to wander off. But then things change when Benji attends a speech by Staff Sergeant Dirk Snyder, a real-life superhero and quadruple amputee who uses prosthetic limbs after an IED explosion. Benji is completely inspired and resolves to become more like Snyder, who he believes is greater than any superhero he'd ever seen before. This story is reinforced powerfully by the compassionate support of Benji's family and friends. With Snyder's mentorship, Benji begins to truly see himself in a new light. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next is a debut middle grade novel by Jennifer A. Nielsen called The Free State of Jax. Middle schooler Jackson is having a tough time after his grandmother's worsening Alzheimer's disease leaves her unable to care for him. Jax has to move to sleepy Walk-on-By, Kansas, to live with his rather unpleasant Aunt Helga and Uncle Clive, and their 6 equally unpleasant children. When his attempts to run away don't work, Jax decides to try something radical. He establishes his own micronation, the Free State of Jax, on a raft floating on a hot springs pond. This pond belongs to his prickly, reclusive neighbor Owen, who is rumored to have murdered his own brother. Owen surprisingly allows Jax to stay, but only on the condition that he writes a constitution. Thus begins Jax's crash course in developing a new society, which he institutes mostly on the fly. A supportive classmate is made its general, her lawyer mother becomes the attorney general, and local kids comprise its army. While dealing with regular skirmishes with his cousins, Jax works on beautifying Owen's property, all while wondering if the sinister rumors about Owen are actually true. While the humor of Jax's family antics is over the top, this book offers a nuanced exploration of personal agency and gives readers a first-hand civics education. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next up is Time Lions and the Chrono Loop, the first in the Time Lions series by Martin Senevirante and Crystal Sutherland. This married collaboration marks their debut into middle grade fiction. Here is an immersive sci-fi fantasy series that kicks off with 12-year-old genius twins Pearl and Patrick. On a time travel trip from contemporary London to ancient Egypt, the Sri Lankan siblings accidentally kill the mosquito destined to infect King Tut with malaria, which, naturally, derails all of history. Luckily, a secret organization called the Interdimensional Misconduct Inquiry steps in to correct the blunder and recruits the twins as agents in training. However, the impulsive duo fails to meet expectations and gets permanently banned from time travel. The twins are later approached by Jack, the young CEO of a shadowy tech startup, who enlists them to fix history and create a utopia to his specifications. The twins are excited by the prospect, but they quickly learn a crucial lesson. One person's idea of a utopia can easily be another's nightmare. Told through alternating viewpoints, this book references real historical figures and events to ground its intricate, fantastical world building. The twins are complex and completely charming, and their journey is all about learning to accept accountability for their impulsive mistakes and understanding their responsibilities as world citizens. This book is recommended for ages 10 and up. Our last new release this week is the graphic novel Winging It the graphic novel Winging It by Megan Wagner Lloyd and illustrated by Michelle Mee Nutter. This is a gentle, emotionally resonant story about Luna, a middle schooler who barely remembers her mother, who died when Luna was a baby. All she's left with are pictures and memories shared by her loved ones, especially her single, hard-working father. Luna's world is completely turned upside down when she and her father move from California to a new suburb outside of Washington, D.C. to live with her rather distant maternal grandmother. Luna starts 7th grade feeling lonelier than ever. It seems impossible to find a single human or animal who actually wants to hang out with her. However, as Luna starts to settle in, she and her grandmother begin to bond over their shared grief and love for Luna's mom. Grandma gives Luna her mother's old nature journals, and Luna is inspired to follow in her mother's footsteps by creating her own diary and joining her school's environmental club, even though she feels like a natural disaster outdoors. Through her grief, Luna starts to find community. The author and illustrator duo highlight this journey beautifully through Luna's budding friendships, her shifting dynamic with her father, and her deepening relationship with her grandmother. The eye-catching earth-toned color palettes perfectly emphasize the role that nature plays in healing old wounds in this graphic novel. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Finishing this week with some headlines. Starting with a school district in Texas shutting down all student access to their libraries. Here on the Book Faire Podcast, we've covered SB 12 in Texas, which prohibits the instruction of DEI and gender identity in Texas schools. However, this week we're looking at SB 13, a bill that requires school libraries to be free of harmful, indecent, or profane content. SB 13 goes further than simply mandating the removal of obscene material. The bill gives the power to select library materials to school district boards, or to parent-led committees called school library advisory councils. Districts can freely choose which of the two methods they will use to oversee their library selection process. This takes us to New Braunfels ISD, which has elected to keep decision-making with their school board. Last week, NBISD voted to shut down all middle and high school libraries in the district to ensure their collections are compliant with the law, at least until they can weed out any materials that may go against SB 13. A statement from the district says the district has, quote, directed a comprehensive review of the district's collection, which includes more than 195,000 books and resources. Secondary schools have a collection of more than 50,000 titles. Books that are found to violate SB 13 will be removed from the library's collection. Secondary library services will remain suspended during this review period, but elementary school library services will not be suspended. New Braunfels ISD administration is allocating resources to expedite the review process and ensure secondary libraries are accessible to students again as quickly as possible. In an update from the school district after the announcement, they have laid out their plans for the process going forward relating to the libraries across New Braunfels ISD. First, any books deemed to be potentially in violation of SB 13 will be removed, pending further review, regardless of whether or not the titles actually violate the new law. This means that if any particular book is pulled from library shelves is in fact in compliance with the law, it will not be available until the review process is concluded. Again, the review process of over 195,000 titles and resources. Second, they will establish a method for parents or guardians to see every book their child has borrowed from the library. And lastly, requiring all book vendors to be in compliance with SB 13, which is the same as a previous piece of legislation in Texas called the Reader Act, which is currently paused due to an ongoing legal challenge. SB 13 has completely pulled control of school libraries from the staff, which includes master's degree graduates in library sciences, and given that control to individuals in government positions, being the elected members of the school board, which do not require any formal training in catalog curation. Next, schools in Illinois are declining offers to host Quincy Public Library's bookmobile visits. This week, a memo was sent out by Quincy Catholic Schools stating, quote, after prayerful consideration, Quincy Catholic Elementary Schools have decided not to host future visits so that all materials on our campuses continue to reflect our Catholic mission and values, end quote. An event for Banned Books Week took place, hosted by Quincy Public Library, which featured the book This Book is Gay by Juno Dawson. Several citizens, along with an elected city official, spoke out against the inclusion of the book, which is likely what led to the discussions between Chris Gill, the chief administrative leader of the Quincy Catholic Elementary Schools, and the Quincy County Public Library. Library officials gave a public response, quote, Quincy Public Library respects the recent decisions by the Catholic schools to discontinue mobile library visits. Our mission remains to provide equitable access to information, ideas, and enrich opportunities for all members of the community. Because the mobile library is a public service, QPL cannot remove or restrict materials based on content or viewpoint. We remain committed to serving all who wish to use library resources and services. End quote. And it seems that the private schools in Quincy are not the only communities having some contention with the mobile library service. In response to the social media coverage for Quincy Catholic Schools, Quincy Public Schools has clarified their own district's policy for bookmobile visits. While Quincy Public Libraries will be hosting the mobile library in school parking lots, they will not be bringing students to the bookmobile while they are in the school's care. Interim Superintendent Cal Lee said that the parking lots of each elementary school serve as an access point for the broader community. However, it raises concerns that they are choosing to expressly say that the students will not be brought to the mobile library at all, instead of saying it won't be done during instruction time, giving students an opportunity to visit the library voluntarily. The mobile library will operate as always, being a public service that anyone in the community can visit while it is in the parking lot of Quincy Public Schools. And closing out this week's episode, dozens of concerned individuals speak out at a library meeting on children's book about a transgender boy. This story comes out of North Carolina, where Randolph County Public Library held public comment over the complaint of a title. The picture book, Call Me Max, written by Kyle Lukoff and illustrated by Luciano Lozano. At a public board meeting, one citizen said, quote, "It just bothered me as a grandmother because I would not want any child to get this that was able to read and read it on their own." She asked that the board consider removing the book or relocating it to another section out of the children's section of the library. Nearly 30 speakers from the community attended one of the largest board meetings, speaking in favor and against removing the book. One citizen said, quote, "You have the choice not to check out that book, but you do not have the right to make that choice for me or anyone else." Others spoke in favor of banning the title. Quote, "Do not make it available. Do not push that agenda. It is wrong. And to anyone out there that is transgender, it is okay to be transgender in Randolph County." The board deliberated, saying that relocating Call Me Max would be a slippery slope, leading to more censorship. And after 2 hours of public comment, the board voted 5-2 in favor of keeping Call Me Max on the children's shelves at Randolph County Public Library, with the stipulation that a parent must be present to check out the book with their child. It is not perfect, but it is still a win in favor of the freedom to read. This will conclude another episode of the Book Faire Podcast. If you'd like to learn more about any of these stories, you can go to patreon.com/thebookfair to find episodes posted early along with news sources used throughout the show. If you appreciate the work being done here, you can help the Book Faire podcast grow by sharing it with a friend, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, I'll talk at you next time.